Unless you're the New England Patriots, your window of opportunity to truly contend for a championship in the NFL is very short. It's a small window. For some teams, they never even open that damn window. For other teams, it cracks open for a year. For other organizations, maybe you get 3 to 5 years. It's a short window. Fans understand it, media understand it, teams understand it. It's just the nature of the beast. So when you are in a position where you can be viewed as a contending team, you don't want to see those opportunities go by the wayside. And you look at the New Orleans Saints, who last year got themselves into a position where they were viewed as a real contender, only to have that Minnesota miracle happen with Stephon Diggs that last play of the game with that missed tackle by Marcus Williams. And you're saying, man, you don't know how many more of those opportunities you're going to get, especially with a quarterback like Drew Brees pushing 40 years of age. And especially then you go into the offseason, you got Mark Ingram, gets popped for PEDs, he's got a 4-game suspension. And you're looking at this team and you're saying, did they miss their opportunity? Well, it was clearly obvious in the draft with the big trade up for Marcus Davenport that the Saints were trying to go all in 2018. That was evident, that was clear, that was obvious, as it should have been. Again, as long as you have Sean Payton and Drew Brees, you need to be in a win-now type of mode. Over the past few years before 2017, you could see they were trying to remake and retool this roster and shake things up, and it's ultimately worked out. But you don't want to see these moments go by and not feel that satisfaction of winning a championship because you only get so many of them. And when the Saints opened up the season and they lost to Ryan Fitzpatrick and Fitzmagic, you're like, what the hell is going on here? The Saints come out that first week and they lay an egg defensively. They got beat by Fitzpatrick and the scrub-ass Bucks. But then they immediately right themselves and they win their next 10 games. Like in 2017, start off 0-2, go on a long winning streak. This time, lose your first game, look bad doing so, and then you win your next 10, where everybody's talking about you being a team of destiny, being the team to beat in the NFC. You're scoring 30 or more points in 8 of those 10 wins. And it looks like it's only a matter of time before the New Orleans Saints face off against somebody, perhaps the New England Patriots or the Kansas City Chiefs or somebody in the damn Super Bowl. But to me, the trajectory of the team this year changed at least a little bit once they had that Thursday night loss to Dallas. That really felt like it was a turning point for this team offensively, in the sense of teams realized that in the passing game, you did have to contend with Michael Thomas. You did have to contend with Alvin Kamara, but not really a whole lot else on a consistent basis. It felt like Drew Brees was starting to wear down a little bit as the season went on. His arm lost a little more zip, a little more pop to it. They just were never the same team in my mind, even though they had some other games where they still put up some points and so forth. They lost that aura of almost invincibility that they had in that 10-game winning streak once that Thursday night loss to Dallas happened, because Dallas was able to smack them in the mouth. Dallas was able to run the ball, control the clock. They were able to get after it on defense, kept the game close, and the Saints struggled. I mean, granted, the Saints still won 13 games. They still won their division. They still ended up with home field advantage throughout the playoffs, which meant that they were hosting the divisional round and then ultimately the NFC Championship game. But even when you got to the playoffs, they should have been a lot better than the Eagles. The Eagles team that they kicked the snot out of earlier in the regular season. What was that game? 48-7? But now you get to the divisional round, they got to squeak by and wait for a ball to go through Alshon Jeffrey's hands in order to win. Now you get to the NFC Championship game, and you're like, can they actually beat the Rams again? Now, I still thought they were going to. I still thought they would. And then the game happened. And, it's easy to sit here and talk about the screw job by the refs. Not calling that pass interference on that third down on Nickell Robey-Coleman. It's easy to complain about that. It is easy to bitch about that because it is legitimate to complain and bitch about because it was so glaringly obvious and so god-awful, terrible, bad. But you cannot point to one single play, as easy as it is, as natural as it is, and say that alone represents a screw job by the refs, a screw job by the NFL, or the fact that the Saints got hosed, because you could point to other things and other moments throughout that game where you could sit there and say, hey, you know what? If you handle this differently, that differently, you're never in that position. Like, when you talk about a game, it's the whole story that builds up to it. Those first 3+ quarters, that's the build-up. That's the storyline arc. Those are the plot devices and so forth. It's not always just about the finish. And while it's easy to focus on that one play, what about the penalties that the Saints defense had that weren't called? Late hits, unnecessary roughness, and Jared Goff, they weren't called. What happens if you don't allow fake punts to be converted? What happens if you're able to better hold on to the early lead that you had? Any number of things. What happens if you actually run the ball 3 straight fucking downs late in the game, play for the field goal, run some more clock, and not give the Rams as much clock as you did? Maybe they don't end up in that position where they come down and tie the damn game. Force the game to go in overtime. Those are the things you have to think about. You have to think about those things. It's not just about that one play. But, of course, it's going to always be the focus on that one play. And it'll be, frankly, something that Saints fans will never be able to get over. And I certainly understand it. Because you had a championship-level team. And even though they hadn't been playing as well, in my estimation, at the tail end of the season and into the playoffs, they should still have been good enough to make it to the big dance. And we'll certainly have confidence that they would have played better in the Super Bowl than the fucking Rams did. But it wasn't meant to be. So you take a season where Drew Brees completes over 74% of his passes, only throws 5 picks. You got Michael Thomas with 125 catches, over 1,400 yards. You got still one of the best 1-2 punches in the backfield in the league with Kamara and Mark Ingram. You got Cameron Jordan and Sheldon Rankins, a combined 20 sacks. Unfortunately, Rankins with that playoff injury, but still, he finally showed up and started playing really well. It's like, it just wasn't meant to be. And these are the types of opportunities that are missed, that aren't cashed in on, that as fans you think about 5, 10, 20 years down the road, and you think to yourself, it could have been, and damn it, it should have been, and it ultimately wasn't. And you look at the Saints team now. Obviously, you're all in with Sean Payton and Drew Brees for however much longer they choose to be there. And that's the way it has to be. Your window of opportunity to contend is however long they're there. But, there are some troubling signs based off of Brees' play late in the season. He was not the same dude at all. Still elite, still a Hall of Famer, but he was not the same guy. And for the Saints now, going into this year's draft and offseason, without a lot of cap space, without a first-round pick, where are those necessary improvements going to come from? Because you could say, well, they didn't need a whole lot of help. True, but they could use another wide receiver. They could use a more capable tight end to help out Drew Brees. Defensively, they could use some help at outside linebacker. They could use some depth inside a defensive tackle. But you also don't have a third-round pick because you traded that away for Teddy Bridgewater. Like, you really wonder if 2018 was it for this current construction of the Saints. They didn't get it done in 2017. When you talk about snake-bitten type of franchises, the Saints for years used to be snake-bitten. But in recent years, you can't really say they were snake-bitten. They won a championship on the skip-de-skip whoop-de-woo. But, man, you look at the last 2 seasons and way those seasons ended for the Saints, they've had some really damn bad luck. And sometimes that's just the way it goes. And for Saints fans, they certainly hope that this hasn't closed that window of opportunity, but it very well might have been slammed shut on you.